I'd first like to call out Rebecca Parrish, who you saw was the director, cinematographer, editor, everything. And Nicole, the producer. Who has her thumb? Matt Fagerholm? Yep. You stand. You two stand. Oh, look. And can we have the composer, Heather McIntosh? And Nate can have her thumb. We're going to have you take a seat, and we are. Okay. And we have to introduce another guest. And I'm going to have, in just a minute, I want to introduce another guest. How do I begin? The person I'm going to introduce was not in this movie, but he is invited as a guest because he is one of my favorite people in this whole world. And I mean that sincerely. I have watched him over the years fight for justice, fight for the poor, fight for communities in Chicago against great risk. He's gone up against gang members. He's gone up and tried to get guns out of the community. He's tried to get liquor signs and liquor stores away from schools. He's done everything. And he too has had some problems with the hierarchy of the church when he was doing what he thought was right, and he continues, he still stands today. He was recently portrayed kind of in a movie that Spike Lee did called Chirac, and it was played by John Cusack. Will you please help me welcome the Reverend Michael Father Pfleger. You too get a golden thumb. You sat by Roger's hospital bed many hours when he was sick. You spoke at his funeral and memorial service. You were a great friend to him and to us and to the community. I salute you. And I was going to moderate this panel, but I can't because there's someone here who loves this movie so much. Rebecca, Nicole, and Heather, he sings your praises all the time. He is one of our assistant editors at RogerEbert.com, Matt Fagerholm. I'm going to let him moderate.
Thank you so much.
I'm just going to sit,
Thank you so much, Chaz. I'm so passionate about this film because it means the world to me. It really does. I saw it at the AFI Docs Fest in Washington, D.C. last summer, and it was at a time where I was deeply cynical about religion. I'm a former Catholic, and I was hearing all these words from different public figures, different films that were preaching all these messages of intolerance and division and hatred, really. And I was like, this is not what I experienced in church. I would go back in my mind and think, what are the spiritual experiences I truly had in church? And it was always about when my eyes would lock with someone else. in the congregation, and we'd share this moment. We'd share this certain communication you can't even really put your finger on, but it all really boiled down to love free of judgment is really what it was. It was this love that we were communicating to each other. And that is what these sisters communicate. That is what your film communicates. And I think it's the sort of message that goes against all, it goes through all ideological boundaries. It transcends them completely. And so I just thank you for that.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely.
How did this project get started? Rebecca or Nicole, either one.
Yeah, sure. So about 5 years ago, was it 6 now? 2010, a friend of mine had worked at St. Leonard's Ministries to start the class, the school program that you saw Sister Jean teaching in a scene in the film, to help people get their high school equivalency credit after coming out of prison. And this friend of mine was an atheist. She would identify as queer, which is a strange term for some. It means like lesbian, kind of. And I said, okay, my queer atheist friend is like buddies with these nuns. Like, who are these nuns? Because my exposure to Catholic nuns, as far as I could tell, I may have met nuns and not known they were nuns, because they don't broadcast it. So my exposure was limited to Hollywood movies and to a lot of the stereotypes. Many of these films are full of stereotypes. So, Sister Act, Blues Brothers kind of thing. And so I was a seeker. I'd still identify as a seeker, a person who's not very rooted in a particular religious tradition, but has a hunger for that deeper meaning of life and that feeling of connection. And so when, the fact that these nuns, Catholic nuns, were friends with my queer atheist friend, gave me a hint that they might have some of these spiritual messages that I was seeking, even though we didn't share the same tradition. And that's really that, and then the idea for me that any experience I had that I could identify with spirituality was rooted in social service and social justice work. And so that the nuns also were carrying that line forward as the core of their spirituality was really something that I wanted to learn from.
Father Flager, you knew Sister Jean. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with her.
I first met Sister Jean at St. Leonard's house when I had members from my church that I had recommended to go there to get their GED and were going through transformation in their lives, who had records and were in a reentry program. Sister Jean, like the sisters moving, first of all, thank you. Thank you for showing the best of what the Catholic Church ought to be about and doesn't realize it. Thank you. But Sister Jean that I knew and met was the same Sister Jean you showed. I mean, she was people want to identify her as a rebellious, but she was just the one who was rooted in her love for God and her love for people. And unfortunately, that looks radical in a church that has forgotten who she is. But that's not radical, that's the gospel. And the church has forgotten totally who she was called to be. And that's why I'm glad you ended it like you did, because thank God Francis came into the Catholic Church when he did now, and I have hope again.
I would love to ask all the filmmakers here about one thing I find so intriguing about the film, which is this juxtaposition of ancient traditions and modern ideas. And it goes all the way from the title design to the approach to the score. I'd love to hear you all talk about that.
Sure, yeah, I'll kick it off. That was a hugely important to me because, well, you see one kind of calcified maybe version of some of those ancient traditions reflected in certain aspects of the film, but also you see that the continuity of those traditions in the sisters' work and their spirituality. And one of the things that was very important to me as this millennial seeker, not identified with any religion, was that I could connect so deeply with these sisters who, were of a completely different generation who I might have seen on the street, or maybe they were wearing a cross, pin or something that was a symbol of their community, and I might have seen that pin and said, oh, well, they're going to judge me. I'll just, make my way around them. And so it was very important to me that we tell the story in a way that would be a bridge. And so one of the things that we were looking for in the music was to find a composer who could also create that bridge in her music and in the score, to have it rock, and then to also have these, ancient instruments. And you can speak to that much more articulately than I can.
Well, it was a great jumping off point for this film. When I first saw it, I was just like, they're so lively and they're so passionate about their work. You wanted to make sure that, I love the idea of doing this through line of bringing in sort of these traditional, soprano and tenor, contratenor, get the vocal aspects of it and have heart, but to be able to do it in a way where it kind of rocks in its own way. And so, because these sisters, holy cow, they're moving and shaking. So it's cool to get to really put that joy and that energy in with their livelihood, their whole passion. So it was a fun place to hang out. It was fun to hang out with those sisters. It was great.
And Nicole, how did you come about as the producer?
Well, Rebecca started this project and with another producer who went on to grad school, and as she said, she wasn't Catholic. And so she was looking for somebody who maybe had a little bit more experience with the Catholic Church. I'm Italian. I'm a girl. I have 12 years of Catholic education, and before that I used to go with my grandmother to the seminary and wash the priest's clothes. So I know a lot about nuns. And for me, this was actually a really wonderful healing experience because I grew up with these women, and there was a very conservative order, and then my mom decided I needed to go to more Catholic school, and I went to Regina Dominican, which is Jean's order, and those ladies, I think it's in part of their creed to speak the truth to power. And so for me, learning that and learning about women's history in the church and seeing how it was playing out, in kind of the late 80s, which was kind of very charismatic in social justice and going out to the people, and then it just kind of shifted, and there was going to be no role for me. I just left. I was like, well, fine. I learned what I needed to do. I'm a good Catholic. I don't need to be a part of this church. I don't understand this church. And then I did this film with Rebecca, and I was like, oh, that is what I remember. And I didn't leave the church. The church kind of left me, but it was still there. We just had to look for it. And I know so many people like me whose hearts were broken by that and by not feeling like they could participate. So that for us was a really important part in making this film, is to make a film that could show both sides, both visions of a church, and if not reconcile them, at least try to heal them.
Yeah, I have to ask too. Rebecca was an intern at Cartemquin Films in Chicago. It's just this amazing company. Steve James is from there, did Life Itself and Hoop Dreams. And I think one of the strengths of this film is how you hone in on these little details, these little moments. Like when Sister Simone is like, oh, we have 14 more days of this, holy shit. It's just those little human moments that just make it so much more compelling. I'd love to ask a bit about just that background, how that informed you as a filmmaker.
Yeah. Well, first I'll just have to respond to that moment, because there were a lot of people who wanted us to take that moment out.
Oh, yeah.
Who were very protective of the sisters and felt like, well, they're going to get attacked for this movie, and this is going to give ammunition, that she says this. Simone was not concerned about it at all. And for me, it was very important because it shows their humanness, like you said. I mean, there's a history of putting sisters and other religious leaders on a pedestal, and to see their humanness is really what makes them accessible and helpful, and part of our community and part of all of us, which is where they want to be. So yeah, I mean, I think that's, in any kind of storytelling, that's what it's all about, is that intimacy, and that willingness to be, on the part of the subjects, to be vulnerable. That's what makes it meaningful for the rest of us that are watching, because then we can tap into that with our own vulnerability. Yeah, and of course, Cartemquin, it's, super important in my formation in documentary, just such good people there. And I'm working with Steve James on his new project now, so it keeps going.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Father Flager, I have a question for you, because I wondered how hierarchy of the church deals with. I've been to your church, St. Sabina, which is a Catholic church on the south side of Chicago. And when you walk into a church, you know, they have either a picture or some sort of depiction of Jesus Christ, whether on a cross or whatever. When you walk into St. Sabina, there's a big picture of a big black Jesus in the church. And sometimes when people don't know and they walk in and they look and they're taken aback, and what do you have I don't even know what question I'm asking you about. I remember some of the cardinals in Chicago, and I can't imagine that they were all happy about that.
No, none of them were, actually. I am like the sisters who got censured. I got censured in the seminary, and I'm the only priest in the history of the archdiocese that got suspended twice. I'm still here. But I think what we're called to do, as not because I'm a priest, but as a Christian, as a Catholic, and I think what the sisters saw, is that the church has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by hierarchy in a group. Usually whenever I say men and women. At this point, I don't say men, but hijacked by a group of men who were so busy on protecting themselves and lifting themselves up and putting them in these great places of royalty and power and dictatorship, that they got so caught up in that they forgot who they were. And what I think the Catholic Church did is very scriptural, really. It went back to the golden calf. You know, they created a golden calf based on themselves. And I think they got so caught up in that they forgot this is Jesus' church. And that justice, social justice, is not some attachment. Social justice is the DNA of Jesus Christ. It's the DNA of the Scriptures. And when we take that out, we pull Jesus out. So, quickly, to try to answer, if I think it was your question, Chaz, the church has always, I think, tried to hold on to it as it is. And anybody that came against it was an enemy. I remember going to priest meetings and being pointed at by other priests and saying, he's the one that's destroying our church. I would get letters from priests, and usually they would be anonymous, but they would say, give their name, and they'd say, you should leave the church. You know, I would send a letter back to them and say, I'm happy. You're the one that's unhappy. You leave the church. But I think that the church has always tried to intimidate or punish, like they did those sisters. But I think our job, and the sisters, what I love about this is they said, we're not intimidated. And in fact, if you kick us out, and that's how I felt, if you kick us out, so what? I mean, we still are who we are, with or without a sanction of the institution.
And give us an update on what Sister Chris and the nuns are doing.
Yeah, so Sister Chris is working on a book about women leaders in the early church. And it will, one of the things that I'll share is how you can get on our mailing list. And if you're on our mailing list, then we can notify you when it's out, because it's not published yet. And so that's some really exciting. She's doing just some real deep new research into this art and archaeology that you see a glimpse of in the film. And then the network, Sister Simone and Network and the nuns on the bus are continuing to do their lobbying organizing work, the work that they were doing before the censures, the same work that they're continuing to do now, which is to make sure that people who are marginalized in the society are heard on Capitol Hill, and that there's funding for programs to try to, change these sort of intractable problems and help liberate people from some of the oppression that we're under. One of the things that I wish was a slightly, it's in there, but you can't fit everything in a film. But Network was founded by these nuns because they were all doing social service work. They were all doing this boots on the ground work, and they saw how the changes in federal funding would impact their ability to do their work on the ground. And that's how they organized and started this lobbying organization in D.C. So they're carrying on that tradition.
Actually, has the Vatican seen this movie? Have you been invited to show it?
We've not received an invitation.
What do you see as like the broader sort of struggle that the sisters have to face right now, or like how we can sort of get involved? Because I love to see, I mean, that was such a revelation for me. These sisters existed. How are they representative of the church? Like, I would love to hear from Father Flager on that too. How are they representative of a larger movement in the church, or just, I would love to know about that.
Yeah, you talk. I'm going to get a little sign that I left right here.
Well, I think one thing is that I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people ended up walking away from the church because they said they couldn't relate with, they couldn't identify with anymore. I look at my congregation at Sabina sometime. 40% of my membership are people who had left the Catholic Church and now have come back. So I think that a lot of folks walked away, and I think what now this is with this new pope and with the new breath that he's trying to breathe into the church, which is very difficult because, again, I mean, there are bishops and cardinals all around the country and the world who are fighting him. And I pray every day that he has a food tester before he eats. But
Sister Chris knows the food tester. Really.
Good, he needs one. But I think that there's another whole awakening of going on of young people, and I think and of older people in the church who are saying, maybe something can change now. Maybe we can get back to who we are. But it may not be as public as known, but there's a very big divide right now. You know, it's funny. Just real quick, and I go back to you. I have this group right now, and I quote things that the Holy Father has said. And it's funny, all these people that used to tell me, you better do what the Pope says. Well, now the coin is flipped. And I tell them, you better do things that the Pope says. And they tell me the Pope's wrong. So they told me I was going to hell. I tell them they're going to hell.
Is there anything you want to chime in before I launch into this? Okay. So one of the things that's really exciting for us with this film is the social impact campaign that's tied to the film. And so a major part of the campaign is that we have community screenings. So if you're part of a community that you want to bring the film to, then you can reach out to us through our website, and I'm going to give more information about how to do all this in a second. And sign up to host the film. And so we have different versions so we have the film, and then we have a discussion, reflection, and action guide that can be used for community building after the film. And we have it broken up for different types of groups who are seeing it. So there's a Catholic guide, there is a multi-faith guide, and then there's also a broader social justice guide for people who are like me, who may not come from a particular faith tradition, but see that spiritual grounding in their work. And so I would like to invite everybody, even though we're in a theater, it's considered rude to take out your phone. Right now, it would not be rude to take out your phone. So bring them out. I'm watching you. We can see who is obeying. So if you take
Catholic.
Yeah, I know. I learned a thing or two. So if you will start a text message to this number, 33733. So this is like the phone number you're texting to, okay? 33733. And then in the body of the text, write RAD film. Okay, and case doesn't matter. So this is all uppercase, but it's RADFILM. And this will it'll prompt you to add your email address, and it's a good way to join our mailing list. And through that, you'll receive an email with information about the website and ways that you can participate in this movement, whether you're Catholic or Muslim or an atheist. We're building this together. So.
I have a question about, did you want to say something, Nicole?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one thing that I love about this film is that the sisters are so good at modeling that you can actually impact the world in whatever way that you are capable of, in whatever way moves you. So it doesn't have to be this whole, you don't have to take on Congress, you don't have to take on the Vatican. You can take on something in your community that's important to you. You can support the people who need help in your own communities, and it can be in any way that you feel like you could and that you're moved to do.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, that's what the action items are based on. They're very for you to find your personal, what's in your heart. That's what the guide and the materials that we put together are designed to help foster.
Someone, the Vatican recently came out, and the Pope Francis came out with some new guidelines recently, and some thought they didn't go far enough in making a path for women priests one day. What's your...
Well, I think it was the beginning. I hope and pray that it's going to... I think what the Pope's trying to do right now is create a ripple effect, and the ripple effect is getting people who think and believe in those things to begin, as you just mentioned, to speak up, to stand up, so that we can reorganize those folks all around the world, so that, I think the Pope in many ways is trying to do what Roosevelt said to Paul Robeson, make me do it. And I think the Pope is putting the words out now to try to get folks to begin to push that. I hope and pray that we're going to have women deacons soon. I hope and pray we're going to have married priests soon, and that we have women priests soon. But I think all that is on the way. But people have to speak up. And I think what you mentioned is so important. If we wait for having the Pope to do this, then we are fighting against everything the nuns tried to fight against. We are becoming what they were trying to fight against. It's not waiting for somebody to tell us something's okay. It's pushing to say it is okay, and keep saying it until that conversation becomes a tide of which then we can move forward and realize that the church's voice is always supposed to be prophetic. It's supposed to be calling us to our best, not holding us in some place of hostage. And so I think that the Pope is saying these things and putting out these words about the poor and about the disenfranchised. He just today, we came back from Greece bringing immigrants that Greece was deporting. He put them on his plane and brought them back to the Vatican with him. So I think he's demonstrating and he's speaking, and now we got to be the four nuns. All of us.
Are we good?
Yes, we are going to open it to the audience for questions. And while they're doing that, because they have to get the microphones to them, if any of you have anything to say.
Oh, yeah, no. I'll say one thing. Sister Jean Hughes is one of my favorite people I've seen in a film in recent memory, and watching just the warmth of her fill this theater, I was definitely misty-eyed throughout the whole thing. Just an amazing woman. So you think this accurately captured the woman you knew?
Absolutely. It's absolutely Sister Jean. And I know of a young man in my church who she literally changed his life. She literally changed his life because of the love, and yet kind of like the motherly love, the tough love and the tender love all blended together, and how she cared for him.
We have a question just to your left.
There you are, okay.
This is really for the pastor who John Cusack played in the movie. I am probably, unfortunately, one of the few people in this audience that has seen Chirac and thought it was an excellent movie, and I hoped it was going to be here this year and hope it will be sometime, but I couldn't help thinking of this movie several times while I was watching the movie today, because the same kind of theme really plays through Chirac as powerful women exerting their power. There are scenes in Michael Moore's new movie that show women in power doing things. The only bank that didn't fail in some country was the one that was one run by women. And I just think that we need to have more women in more places of power. And I'm wondering if maybe Chirac will play here eventually. Thank you. We
haven't decided next year's slate yet. it's possible it could be here one day. But that, standing up, the other thing that filmmakers who come here to our festival tell us, looking at the audience, sometimes, you know, you may see silver hair, you may see whatever. People stand up and they love the Ebertfest audience. And no, I can't think of too many people who would have expected you to say what you just said about Chirac and about Michael Moore's movie. Absolutely. So anyway, I love the Ebertfest audience. Okay. Anyway, where's the next question?
I've got a question all the way to the right, to your right.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Nicole Anderson Cobb. I just want to offer greetings, first of all, to Father Flager. I'm a Southside Catholic school baby from St. Bronislava, Immaculate Conception, Jesus Our Brother, and 4 years at Seton Academy. So I just offer you 12 years of Catholic school training, which made me, I think, one of the fiercest women ever, who was educated by nuns like these. However, one of the things I think this movie helps us understand is the extent to which these women are reaching across the divide of class and race. And Pastor, because you moderated my play Tangled in ETA that deals with gun violence in Chicago, and thank you for that, I just want you all to talk a bit about this issue of segregation, which seems to be exemplified in the film and showing how these women of faith are reaching across issues of class and race, and what lessons they have to give to us who are, I'm from Chicago, but have been in and out of this community for the last 25 years and see the issue of segregation being profoundly entrenched. So what say you to us grappling with this issue on the ground?
Big question. Yeah, I mean, I think that, I'm glad that that's the reaction you have, because one of the things that I'll be honest, that I struggled with a lot in this film was that we've got 3 white women heroes, and in Sister Jean's story, you know, we don't want to create a white savior narrative. And so that was very scary to me. But you know, it's Jean. And you see that, you know, she's with people in their struggle, right? And that she's learning and she's growing. And she talks about, you know, part of her narrative, which goes way back before the start of the film, you know, is what she was able to learn from the people that she's with, and that it's a reciprocal relationship. Even though she dispenses some great advice, if she needs diamonds, drop her. So, yeah, I mean, Jean just has the most open heart. I think that's where it started for her. It's not, you know, I think from a, you know, as somebody who has some history in like the white anti-racist organizing and like doing my work and all that stuff, is that sometimes you can get all wrapped up in yourself and your own fears and how you're going to come across and this and that. And you never, with Jean, it's just like, what's the work? You know, with all the sisters, what's the work that needs to be done? How are we going to do it? Okay, and constantly learning in that process.
Right, and I think having compassion for people who want to engage you, you know, showing up and if you're going into a community that you're not a part of, you know, showing up and saying, how can I help you? How can I be of service?
Right.
And knowing that people who are doing that aren't necessarily, they're doing it because they want to come from a place of assistance. So having compassion with anyone that you're working in and you're engaging with, and understanding that people aren't coming from the same place, they don't have the same background, so they may not understand something in the way that you do, and to just take them at their word and, you know, tell them what you need, and, you know, and then just tell them if they're doing it wrong, but do it from a place of compassion, because we're learning from each other.
And I think the thread that weaves through all the barriers and all the divisions that are all real, and we live in Chicago, the most segregated city in the nation. But what weaves through all that and breaks through all that is love. Is love and genuineness and understanding. We're all students of each other. We're all learning from each other. We all have something to get from each other. That nobody comes in from the standpoint that they know it all. Because, you know, I told the mayor of Chicago one time, I said, you know, Miss Rawls across the street, she never finished high school, but she knows more about the city than you do. because she knows it and lives it and breathes it and loves it. It's understanding that love and compassion and care, humanity is the greatest thing we can ever share with one another. And when we come from that standpoint, it breaks through those barriers because people, I don't care, white, black, brown, yellow, makes no difference. People know if you're for real. And the people know if you're perpetrating, if you're pretending, if you're condescending, if you're patronizing, they know that, and they know it's for you. And if we just act out of what we think is right and just and good and wrap it in love, people gravitate around them, particularly in a day when there's so much hate. I think love is the key.
Yes. And how wonderful you just said that after Paul Cox so eloquently spoke about love before this. And the combatants for peace in yesterday's film said it so beautifully too.
From the balcony at the top on your right.
There you are. Hi, okay. I just wanted to applaud you for making such a comprehensive film that covered all the areas. I'm a cradle Catholic. I have met Sister Simone. I've been very fortunate to hear her speak. And it's just, she runs an incredible organization. But you wove together all of the factors in the censorship of the leadership of religious women in the United States, with the politics with Ryan's budget, with the Nuns on the Bus marketing campaign that was just pure genius, in my opinion. And I just thought it was wonderful the way you wove all that together with the fact that we have a new pope now. It was just incredible. So I definitely applaud your efforts. And definitely thank you, Chaz, and everyone in the Ebert Foundation for bringing this film here. This is my first Ebertfest, but it won't be my last.
You have a question?
My question concerns what's your next project?
Thank you very much.
So the project that I think we all have a lot of next projects. The project that I'm working on right now that I mentioned briefly earlier with Steve James is about a school system in a suburb of Chicago, and it's looking at how race impacts students' experiences and their both academic and socially, within that school system. So I'll keep it short because we all have a lot.
My next project, I'm co-directing a documentary on Harold Washington, who was the first African-American mayor of the city of Chicago, and it's really going to be, my co-director grew up in the campaign and is now a community organizer in his own right, so it's kind of a personal narrative of finding your own voice and what happens when you have a charismatic leader who then suddenly dies, and looking at what happened to the black political class in Chicago and how it can be regained, and how work like the activists now, what they're doing, are carrying on that work and how it can be bridged into something that's sustainable.
I have a handful of narrative films I can't really talk about yet, but I'm working on a documentary about the filmmaker Hal Ashby, so that's coming up with Amy Scott, Chicago person.
Oh, I got the message that we have time for like one more question, and somebody's really, I don't know if that's where, do you have a microphone back there or not, or where's the microphone?
Question up front here.
Here. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think.
We'll talk after.
Yeah, you'll have to talk to them afterwards.
Oh. Well, I shot
Like
my hand up, right away, because oh, you need to hold it? Okay. As I was watching this and seeing the church officials question these nuns' Christianity, I was getting really angry because of just how often the church has turned a blind eye to the issue of priests' sexual molestation of children. But then I realized I don't really know how much the Vatican has investigated that. So I was wondering if, Father Flager, if you could compare the scope of the investigation on the U.S. nuns to what types of investigations the Vatican has done into priests' abuse of children.
Well, I mean, let's face it, the sexual abuse issue of priests came about because it was forced. It wasn't because they went into it and decided we're going to get to the bottom of this. I think it got as bad as it got because the church, like it did with the nuns, operated in arrogance, that you don't tell us, we take care of our own. And I think that arrogant bubble was finally burst by the pressure of society and police and state's attorneys and the rest. And I think we're still seeing so much of it unveiling. I think whereas the nuns, whenever they're coming down on somebody that they choose to come down on, they come very hard. When it comes against them, they put up the wall of how dare you come at us. I said maybe 18 years ago to Cardinal Bernardine, why do we have a committee that investigates when somebody makes a charge? There's no other corporation in America that does that. Just get away with your committee, do away with your middleman, tell people, call 911. Do what everybody else has to do. The church should not be protecting itself or policing itself. When they police somebody like the nuns, they come down very hard. When they're being policed, they stand up very hard and put up a wall. But I think the wall's down. And again, I may be very, very naive. I hope I'm not. But I really think if Francis lives long enough to really put in place, in structure, because if he dies today, we go back to what the nuns had to deal with. But if he lives long enough to put in new hierarchy and new procedures and new thought, I think there's hope for the church to be the church again.
Maybe even hope for a woman pope? I don't know. But anyway, but deacons, women deacons, all right. All right, thank you so much. Heather, Nicole, Rebecca, Father Flager, Matt, thank you.